When we study the life of Abraham Lincoln, it's important to study his personality. One of the best ways to learn about his personality is to study some of the relationships he had during his younger years. The document collection provided on this website includes 5 different primary source documents, which allows us to gain a little bit of insight into some of the relationships that Lincoln had with women earlier on in his lifetime before his presidency. The first document, Document A, is an excerpt from William Herndon's recollections. William Herndon being Lincoln's longtime law partner, he collected oral histories after Lincoln's death. And this document, Document A, refers to a woman named Anne Rutledge, who Lincoln was alleged to be in love with before her death. Documents B, C, and D refer to Lincoln's relationship with a woman named Mary Owens, who Lincoln was for a time engaged to. And Document E is a letter written from Lincoln to Eliza Browning, in which he describes his relationship with Mary Owens and what occurred during those years. As we take a look at these documents, there are some questions, some essential questions you may want to ask yourself, and if you're a teacher, you may want to ask your students. And among those are, what do these documents teach us about Abraham Lincoln's personality? And do you think that these experiences that Lincoln had could have or would have had an impact on his political ambitions or actions? Ultimately, it's up to the student to come up with a conclusion to this, and of course, there's no right or wrong answer. The first document in this collection, Document A, is an excerpt from William Herndon's recollections regarding Lincoln's relationship with Anne Rutledge. Historians have to this very day disagreed over whether or not Lincoln had a relationship with Anne Rutledge or fell in love with this woman. Nonetheless, it is a significant part of Lincoln lore, and it is up to the student to decide whether Herndon's recollections are valid and creditable historical sources, and whether or not the story of Anne Rutledge fits into the rest of the story regarding Lincoln's relationships. Rutledge died in 1835, and the following excerpt is a description of the impact, according to Herndon, that the death of Anne Rutledge had on Abraham Lincoln. Said Herndon, "The most astonishing and sad sequel to this courtship was the disastrous effect of Miss Rutledge's death on Mr. Lincoln's mind. It operated strangely on one of his calm and stoical makeup. As he returned from the visit to the bedside of Miss Rutledge, he stopped at the house of a friend who relates that his face showed signs of no little mental agony. He was very much distressed," is the language of this friend, "and I was not surprised when it was rumored subsequently that his reason was in danger." One of Miss Rutledge's brothers says, "The effect upon Mr. Lincoln's mind was terrible. He became plunged in despair, and many of his friends feared that reason would desert her throne. His extraordinary emotions were regarded as strong evidence of the existence of the tenderest relations between himself and the deceased. The truth is, Mr. Lincoln was strangely wrought up over the sad ending of the affair. He had fits of great mental depression and wandered up and down the river into the woods woefully abstracted, at times in the deepest distress. If, when we read that the many credible persons who knew him at the time tell us, we do not conclude that he was deranged, we must admit that he walked on that sharp and narrow line which divides sanity from insanity." Historians don't have any direct evidence from Lincoln himself that this relationship occurred, so it's up to students of history to determine whether or not they think Herndon's recollections are credible sources. One of the things we can do to try to make this determination is put this story in the context of a relationship that came afterwards. When Lincoln agreed to marry or become engaged to the sister of a friend, a woman named Mary Owens, he did not entirely know her and did not entirely expect this engagement to carry on. When he eventually did meet her, his opinions perhaps changed, as we may see later, but we have 3 letters between Lincoln and Mary Owens, and they shed light into Lincoln's personality and into Lincoln's courtship of this woman, and we can ask ourselves, what kind of relationship did the 2 of them have? Afterwards, we'll take a look at a letter written by Lincoln to another woman in which he discusses this incident, and perhaps there are some contradictions. The first letter we have from Lincoln to Mary Owens in this collection is a letter dated December 13th, 1836. In this letter, Lincoln conveys a genuine affection for Mary Owens. As he writes of his arrival in Springfield, Illinois, he He writes, "I have been sick ever since my arrival here, or I should have written sooner. It is but little difference, however, as I have very little even yet to write. And more the longer I can avoid the mortification of looking in the post office for your letter and not finding it, the better. You see, I am mad about that old letter yet. I don't like very well to risk you again. I'll try you once more anyhow." Later on in this letter, Lincoln goes on to talk about business and what's been going on in Springfield as a representative in the Springfield State Legislature, and he ends the letter by saying, "Write back as soon as you get this, and if possible, say something that will please me, for really I have not been pleased since I left you. This letter is so dry and stupid that I am ashamed to send it, but with my present feelings I cannot do any better." Here Lincoln seems to convey some sort of affection for Mary Owens and the sentiment that he misses her and that he has some sort of genuine respect for her. It would appear that by the time Lincoln wrote his second letter to Mary Owens on May 7th, 1837, his feelings had changed a little bit and had evolved slightly, and now he seems a little bit more hesitant about his relationship with Mary Owens. In this letter, Lincoln said, "I have commenced 2 letters to send you before this, both of which displeased me before I got half done, and so I tore them up. The first I thought wasn't serious enough, and the second was on the other extreme. I shall send this, turn out as it may. This thing of living in Springfield is rather a dull business after all. At least it is so to me. I am quite as lonesome here as I ever was anywhere in my life. I have been spoken to by but one woman since I've been here, and should not have been by her if she could have avoided it. I've never been to church yet, nor probably shall not be soon. I stay away because I am conscious I should not know how to behave myself. I am often thinking about what we said of your coming to live at Springfield. I am afraid you would not be satisfied. There is a great deal of flourishing about in carriages here, which it would be your doom to see without sharing in it. You would have to be poor without the means of hiding your poverty. Do you believe you could bear that patiently? Whatever woman may cast her lot with mine, should any ever do so, it is my intention to do all in my power to make her happy and contented, and in there is nothing I can imagine that would make me more unhappy than to fail in the effort. I know I should be much happier with you than the way I am, provided I saw no signs of discontent in you." Certainly this letter is very much open to interpretation. One can look at this and say that Lincoln is maintaining his fondness for Mary Owens and conveying legitimate concern for her and her well-being and her happiness. Another way of looking at it would be that Lincoln is perhaps looking for a way out. He is identifying some potential problems with their relationship and explaining to her that the future, were they to end up getting married, would not necessarily be a bright one or a happy one. And it's really up to the student of history to decide what exactly Lincoln's intention here is in this letter. Now we take a look at the fourth letter in this package, document D, another letter from Lincoln to Mary Owens, and this time it seems like he's leaving little doubt about how he wants this relationship to go, and the fact that he really thinks it would be best if it were to come to an end. In referring to their relationship, Lincoln said in this letter, "I want at this particular time more than anything else to do right with you, and if I knew it would be doing right, as I rather suspect it would, to let you alone, I would do it. And for the purpose of making the matter as plain as possible, I now say that you can now drop the subject, dismiss your thoughts if you ever had any from me forever, and leave this letter unanswered, without calling forth one accusing murmur from me. And I will even go further, and say that it will add anything to your comfort or peace of mind to do so. It is my sincere wish that you should. Do not understand by this that I wish to cut your acquaintance. I mean no such thing. What I do wish is that our further acquaintance shall depend upon yourself." Lincoln has clearly left in the hands of Mary Owens the choice of whether or not this relationship would continue, and ultimately it did not continue, and their correspondence did come to an end. Now, it's worth considering a number of different questions, and we should once again revisit the questions that we discussed at the beginning of the video. So the first thing we asked was, how would you describe Abraham Lincoln's personality? What do these letters teach us about his personality? What can we learn from them? Do these experiences that Lincoln had, do you think they could have or would have had an impact on his political ambitions or his political actions? It's also worth considering some additional questions. Do these letters truly demonstrate a fondness on the part of Abraham Lincoln towards Mary Owens? And do you take Lincoln at his word when he says the things he says to Mary Owens? Is he being genuine, or is he simply trying to get out of an undesirable relationship? And in an effort to take a look at the bigger picture, it's worth taking a look at, once again, that first document we looked at, the recollections from William Herndon about another relationship with a woman named Anne Rutledge. Do you believe that Lincoln would have engaged in a relationship such as the one with Mary Owens shortly after the death of a woman he was deeply in love with? Does this fit, if you will? Does it make sense that these two things would have happened? Because once again, there's a lot of historical debate about whether Lincoln truly had that relationship, since we don't have any evidence other than the recollections. I would encourage you to take a look at the next video on this website. The next video takes a look at a letter from Lincoln to a friend named Eliza Browning. And in this letter, Lincoln explains in depth what happened between him and Mary Owens, and he sheds a different light on the entire situation, and one that may change the way you think about this relationship and the way you think about Lincoln.